Imagine building an entire metropolis from scratch, investing more than $100 billion, and discovering that no one wants to live there. 40-meter-wide avenues completely empty, monumental buildings without a living soul. A Mongolian hat-shaped opera house echoing in the silence. This is Kangbashi, in China's Inner Mongolia, the most expensive ghost city in the world. On the vast plains of Inner Mongolia, an autonomous region in northern China, there was nothing but sand, wind, and the distant echo of wild horses. Ordos was little more than a dot on the map, a collection of pastoral villages where Mongolian nomads lived as their ancestors had for centuries. Everything changed in the early 2000s. Beneath those seemingly useless dunes, geologists discovered something extraordinary: massive deposits of coal and natural gas. Suddenly, that forgotten region became one of the richest in China. Ordos's GDP per capita skyrocketed, surpassing even that of some developed European countries. Local Communist Party officials saw a golden opportunity. In China, political promotions depend directly on economic growth. If you can make your region grow quickly, your career takes off with it. And they had enough money to dream big. If you want to help me to keep doing these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It motivates and helps me keep bringing videos in this format. In 2003, Ordos authorities approved one of the boldest urban plans in modern history. They didn't just want a city, they wanted to create a symbol of prosperity that would impress the world. The Kangbashi New District project would cover 355 square kilometers, an area larger than many European capitals. Located 20 kilometers south of Dongsheng, the old urban center of the region, Kangbashi was to be a futuristic metropolis for 1 million inhabitants. The initial budget? An impressive 1.1 trillion yuan, about $161 billion at the time. Architects were given free rein to create something never seen before. A bronze-clad museum shaped like a desert boulder, symbolizing the transformation of the arid region into an oasis of wealth. A library designed as a row of giant books, representing the knowledge that would elevate the people. An opera house shaped like a traditional Mongolian hat, honoring cultural roots. The squares were designed to rival Washington's National Mall. The avenues, 40 meters wide, could handle the traffic of a bustling metropolis. Each block was planned to house thousands of prosperous residents. Between 2004 and 2010, Kangbashi became the largest construction site in China. Cranes dotted the horizon like soldiers in formation. Trucks hauled tons of concrete and steel along freshly paved roads. The sound of machinery echoed day and night across the desert. Local governments forcibly relocated public offices, hospitals, and elite schools to the new area. Employees had no choice, either move to Kangbashi or lose their jobs. Generous incentives were offered: housing subsidies, massive discounts on apartments, total tax exemptions for those willing to relocate. The original plan to house 1 million people was quietly reduced to 500,000. When the global economy went into crisis in 2008 and coal prices collapsed, the target dropped again to 300,000. Even so, construction continued at a frantic pace. Apartments were sold off-plan to investors from all over China. Under Chinese law, real estate is delivered as a concrete shell, just the basic structures, without interior finishes. This meant that even owners took years to actually move in. And then came 2009. The world finally laid eyes on Kangbashi. Journalists from Al Jazeera and Time magazine arrived in Kangbashi in 2009 expecting to find a booming Chinese city. What they saw left them stunned. Monumental avenues completely empty. 30-story residential buildings without a single light on. Traffic lights working for no one. The central square, larger than Beijing's famous Tiananmen Square, was a sea of concrete where only the wind wandered. The few employees working in government buildings returned at the end of every shift to Dongsheng, the old city. There were no shops, restaurants, or any sign of real urban life. Intersections were half a kilometer apart. To buy milk, one had to drive for several minutes. Everything was designed on a grand scale that simply didn't match reality. Reporters coined a term that spread worldwide: ghost city. Kangbashi became the global symbol of China's alleged real estate bubble, the perfect example of how unrestrained growth can create urban monsters. But there was one detail international observers missed. Between 80% and 90% of the apartments had owners. Chinese families bought property as a store of value, not necessarily to live in. With few safe investment alternatives in the country, real estate functioned as savings. The city was empty, but not abandoned, and that would change everything. While international critics saw only failure, some visionaries saw opportunity. The famous Chinese artist and architect Ai Weiwei launched the Ordos 100 project, an unprecedented architectural experiment. 100 renowned architects from around the world were invited to design futuristic mansions in Kangbashi's desert. Each house would be a livable work of art, exploring the boundaries between architecture, art, and urban functionality. In practice, only a small museum was built. Half a dozen concrete skeletons remained abandoned in the desert, like abstract sculptures against the infinite horizon. The project became a poetic symbol of failure itself, art born of excess, beauty extracted from waste. The city gained other monumental artistic interventions. Bronze rearing horses dominated Genghis Khan Square. Gigantic sculptures dotted empty avenues like totems of a lost civilization. A food center with 400 stalls was built to house Mongolian families displaced by urbanization. Nomads who had lost their traditional lands found a new way to survive by selling typical food to the few curious tourists. But art and monuments don't make a city. People do. Who were the brave ones who decided to live in a ghost city? The first residents of Kangbashi had unique profiles. Many came from distant provinces, attracted by job opportunities in the local government and still affordable housing prices. Others sought something that major Chinese metropolises didn't offer: clean air and tranquility. Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou suffered from extreme pollution and overpopulation. Kangbashi was the opposite, a modern city where one could breathe. Entire families moved in search of better quality of life for their children. Schools were new and well-equipped. There was no chaotic traffic or suffocating crowds. One could walk for entire blocks without meeting anyone. For many, the sense of community was surprisingly strong. When you're one of only a few hundred people in a city designed for hundreds of thousands, everyone knows each other. Neighbors greeted each other on the empty streets. Children played in parks that were entirely their own. But urban life also had unique challenges. Everything was far from everything else. There were no neighborhood shops. The city's monumental scale turned even basic tasks into small driving adventures. In 2013, something changed. The authorities decided it was time to wake the sleeping beauty. Municipal and central governments launched a massive campaign to bring life to Kangbashi. It wasn't enough to have infrastructure, there had to be a real economy, with jobs and services. Fast food chains like McDonald's and Subway received zero rent for years to open stores. The strategy was simple. If young people saw familiar brands, they'd feel the city was normal. Every store that opened was a small sign that Kangbashi was ceasing to be a ghost. Heavy investments were directed at diversifying the economy beyond mining. Electric car factories set up in the region. A technology park was created to attract innovation companies. The idea was to prepare Kangbashi for a post-coal future. The city was also promoted as a 4 amperes category tourist destination, the second highest classification in China's system. Museums began offering Mongolian cultural shows. Traditional horse rider performances and folk dances tried to attract visitors willing to see China's strangest city. The numbers began to change. Official data from 2014 showed 20,000 residents. A 2019 study mentioned 200,000 inhabitants, while other estimates cited 120,000 people. But numbers can lie. Reality on the streets told a more complex story. A 2025 Forbes report estimated Kangbashi had a daytime population of 100,000 people, with 80% permanent residents. Finally, the ghost city seemed to be waking up, but the sense of emptiness persisted in subtle ways. The monumental urban design continued to hinder natural social interaction. Residents described Kangbashi as a car city, where one had to drive even to buy milk around the corner. The gigantic squares, conceived to impress visitors and authorities, ended up discouraging spontaneous manifestations of urban life. There were no cozy corners for small bars. No charming alleys for specialty shops. Everything was big, wide, official. Even so, a generation of children was growing up in those streets. For them, Kangbashi was not a ghost city, it was simply home. Empty parks became private playgrounds. Wide avenues turned into safe bike tracks. The regional economy was still dependent on coal mining, which made the entire project vulnerable to global commodity price fluctuations. Every rise or fall in international markets directly reverberated in the municipal budget. And then we reach the present. What does Kangbashi teach us about the future of cities? Chinese researchers summed up Kangbashi's experience in a simple but profound phrase: building a city is easy. Making it functional requires long-term effort. This phrase perfectly captures the paradox of modern urban development. With enough money, any government can raise skyscrapers, pave avenues, and install top-notch infrastructure. But making a city pulse with authentic urban life is infinitely more complex. It requires time, culture, chance, and thousands of small human decisions impossible to plan. Kangbashi also revealed contradictions in China's growth model. Local officials are promoted based on their region's GDP, which encourages grandiose projects with immediate impact. But sustainable urban development happens over decades, not political terms. Real estate speculation created a surreal situation: a city with owners but no residents. Families bought apartments as investments, not as homes. This completely distorted the relationship between housing supply and actual housing demand. At the same time, Kangbashi showed that not all white elephants are doomed to total failure. With strategy, patience, and adaptation, it's possible to breathe new life into projects seemingly destined for abandonment. But the question that opened our story remains: is Kangbashi a success or a failure? Let's return to that initial question. What happens when you build an entire metropolis from scratch, invest more than $100 billion, and no one wants to live there? The answer, we discover, is not simple. Kangbashi is neither the success its planners dreamed of, nor the total failure international critics declared. It is something more nuanced, an ongoing urban experiment, a real-scale development laboratory. Today, tens of thousands of people call Kangbashi home. Children grow up playing in its monumental parks. Families build memories in its spacious, modern apartments. Entrepreneurs open businesses on its once deserted avenues. Were the $60 billion invested justified? That depends on how we measure urban success. If the criterion is immediate economic efficiency, Kangbashi fails. If it's the capacity to house dignified human lives in modern infrastructure, it passes the test. The ghost city became something even more fascinating than an ordinary city, a mirror of the contradictions of our time. It reflects our obsession with growth, our tendency to treat housing as a commodity, our difficulty balancing planning with spontaneity. Kangbashi teaches us that building cities is easy, but not enough. The real challenge is creating spaces where human life can naturally flourish, and no amount of money can guarantee that. Kangbashi's story is still being written. In its once empty streets, today echo children's voices, car engines, neighborly conversations. The ghost has gained flesh and bone. But its lessons remain ethereal, floating above us as reminders that not everything that glitters is gold, and not everything empty is dead. After all, as this impossible city in the middle of the Mongolian desert discovered, sometimes you need to die a little to truly learn how to live.